Hi, I'm Bob Duhamel, and I'm here to tell you that computers don't use binary numbers. Computers don't use binary numbers. How can I say that? That's what we know about computers. They store binary numbers, they calculate binary numbers, they manipulate binary numbers. How can I say that they don't use binary numbers? So let's take a look at what computers are, and I'll explain that. An electronic computer consists of banks and banks and banks of electrically controlled switches. The first ones used were relays. Here's a picture of a mechanical relay, and it's basically just an electromagnet, which is a coil of wire. Inside that coil of wire we'll put some soft iron. And what I mean by soft iron, it doesn't mean that it's soft. In fact, it's not even iron. It's usually silicon steel. What I mean by soft iron is that it does not hold magnetism when you take a magnetic field away from it. So the coil of wire, we can put some electric current through that. That causes a magnetic field. The iron concentrates it, so we now have an electromagnet. And we put next to that a switch that is controlled by the electromagnet. We have one contact here. Another contact has a hinge and a spring on it, so that we energize this relay and it pulls the contacts of the switch together and closes the switch. We unenergize it, remove the current, and the magnetic field disappears and the switch opens. So it's an electrically controlled switch. And the first electronic computer used hundreds of electromechanical relays as switches. So that's what a computer is, a bunch of switches. And computers are not really that complicated. And what I mean by that is driving through Los Angeles is not complicated. You just drive up to an intersection, you have three choices. Go left, go right, go straight. But then you drive on, you hit another intersection. You have to make the choice again. Go left, go right, go straight. And you have to make that decision over and over and over again to navigate your way through Los Angeles. So driving is not complicated. It's just going straight, left, or right. But navigating through Los Angeles does that hundreds of times, and that's what makes it complicated. Computers are the same way. They are not very complicated. A computer only does three things. And these things can all be done with electromechanical switches. For example, one thing that a computer does is it can put two of these relays together, and I will just show them as schematic switches here like this, and they're connected something like that. So here's a voltage, let's call it plus 5 volts. And we want to move that voltage over to here, or not move it over to here, depending on what we're doing. Let's connect these guys to ground here. Now I have two inputs. I have one relay I can energize, or another relay I can energize. And if I energize this one, that switch closes. Does my 5 volts go to the end? No. So let's do that again with this relay. We'll energize it, and this switch closes. Does that take my voltage to the end? Nope, that switch is still open. So I have no voltage over here. But if I energize both relays, now I have a connection to the end, and here's my plus 5 volts over here. So I have a situation where I have to have both relays energized to get my 5 volts over here. So I have to have this one energized and this one energized. So I have a function called AND. And in modern terms, we would call this particular circuit an AND gate. Two inputs, one output, and only if both inputs are energized, both this one and this one, do I get an output. There's another way I can arrange these switches. Here's my plus 5 volts. I can use any voltage, but plus 5 is a practical one. And what I'm going to do, I'm going to draw this just a little differently. Let's put my other relay down here because I can. And there's my plus, oops, that's not what I want to do. Here's one switch here. and the other switch will be here. So there's my two relays. A little funky the way I drew it, but there we have it. And these will come together for a single output. Now I have my two inputs, my two relays I can energize. And if I energize this one, that closes the switch. Do I have a connection to the output? Yes, I do. There's my plus 5 volts. Now let's unenergize it and energize this one. Do I have my output? Yes, my 5 volts goes to the output. There's my plus 5 volts. So if I energize this relay or I energize this relay, I get an output. So I have a function called OR. And in modern terms, we would call this an OR gate. That's two of the things that a computer does. The last one is a little more complex to draw, although the function is actually even simpler. I have a relay, there's my coil, and a switch. And this one is set up opposite. Let's put actually this is a little simpler if I do it this way. There's my switch. Now my switch is closed. And my relay is not energized, the switch is now closed, and I have my plus 5 volts on the output. Now I'm going to energize the switch, and it's going to pull the switch open. And the plus 5 goes away. So now, if the switch is not energized, I get an output. But if I de-energize it, the output goes away. So I get an opposing function. Put 5 volts here, I get nothing here. Take the 5 volts away, I get 5 volts out here. So I get an inverted function. We call that an inverter. And in modern terms, we might also call that a NOT. N-O-T. So the function means that if I put voltage here, I get no voltage out. If I put no voltage here, I do get voltage out. So that's the inverter or the NOT. So the output is not what I have at the input. So 5 volts, I do not have 5 volts here. If I take the 5 volts away, I do have 5 volts here. So that's the NOT function. So what are the three functions? And, OR, and NOT. And that's all a computer can do. But if we have hundreds or thousands, or today's computers, millions of these circuits that we call gates, I've mentioned that before. We have the AND gate, the OR gate, and the NOT. We have millions of those in a computer today, and we can manipulate those to do all sorts of functions. For example, don't want to get too far ahead of myself here, but if I take two of these relays, back to my original arrangement here, and now I'm going to have what's called a single pole double throw relay on each end. And let's put those up there. There's my output. And what I'm going to do is cross these over like that. Here's my plus 5 volts. And now if both relays are not energized, so here's my two inputs, and let's look at it now. These are not energized, so both relays, both of these switches are in the up position, and we follow this over, no output. If we energize this one, so I've put my plus 5 volts there, that energizes this relay, and we follow it, we do get an output. If I unenergize that and energize this one, follow the circuit, I get an output. But if I energize both of them, then nothing. That's an interesting function. No voltage. That's actually called an exclusive OR, but it can also be made with the AND and the OR and the not function put together. So this could be considered its own gate, but I can make it with the other gates. In fact, if I analyze this closely, you would see that I'm actually building it with both the and the or and the not function put together into one set of two relays. So I've just kind of streamlined it there. And we're going to come back to this a little later because this particular circuit does something really interesting to the inputs, but I don't want to talk about that right now.